When I first saw the envelope on my husband's desk, I thought it was another bank statement. But when I opened it, my hands began to shake. Inside was a contract, my mother-in-law's handwriting, her sharp, deliberate strokes, and at the bottom, 2 signatures, hers and my husband's. The title read, "Trust Agreement for Baby's Future." I remember sinking into the chair, the paper trembling in my hand. Something in my chest turned cold, because even before I finished reading, I knew this wasn't love. This was control, disguised as concern. Before all this, my life was ordinary, happy even. I met Daniel when I was 26, quiet, patient, the kind of man who listened before he spoke. We married 2 years later. I thought I'd found peace with him. We had our own little home, a white fence, a garden of hydrangeas out front that I adored. His mother, Evelyn, lived just 20 minutes away. Elegant, well-spoken, and impossibly sure of herself. From the start, she carried an air of ownership around her son. She'd say things like, "I raised him to value family loyalty. You understand that, don't you, dear?" Her eyes always testing me for weakness. At first I told myself she was just protective. But after I got pregnant, her presence began to expand, quietly but firmly, into every corner of our life. She insisted on choosing the nursery wallpaper. "Something tasteful, not those cartoon animals," she said. She demanded to be in the delivery room. "You'll need a woman who's done this before." And when I gently told her I wanted just Daniel there, she smiled that thin smile that never reached her eyes. "Well," she said softly, "some choices have consequences." I didn't understand what she meant then. But I would. When our son Noah was born, I thought the world had tilted in my favor again. He was perfect. Tiny fingers, dark curls, the faint smell of milk and new beginnings. Evelyn came to visit daily, sometimes unannounced. She'd bring expensive toys, offer unsolicited advice, and correct everything I did. The way I held him, the way I sang to him, even the temperature of his bath water. "You'll spoil him if you keep holding him like that," she'd say, taking him from my arms. "He'll grow up soft, like his father." Daniel never intervened. He'd just smile nervously, caught between us. "She means well," he'd whisper later in bed, brushing my hair from my face. "She just wants to help." But it didn't feel like help. It felt like intrusion. When Noah was 3 months old, Evelyn began talking about his future. She'd drop hints about saving accounts, education funds, family legacies. One afternoon, she showed up with a leather-bound folder and a pen. "I've drafted something important," she said, "for Noah." I remember wiping my hands on a burp cloth, confused. "A will?" I asked. "No, darling. A trust. Something to protect him if, God forbid, anything happens to you." Her tone was light, but the words hit me like cold water. "If anything happens to me," I repeated. She smiled. "You never know, dear. Accidents, illness. It's only sensible to prepare." I told her I wasn't signing anything until I read it properly. She pressed her lips together, displeased but polite. "Of course," she said. "Discuss it with Daniel." I didn't. I was too tired, too overwhelmed with feedings and sleepless nights. I left the folder on the counter, and over the days that followed it disappeared. When I asked Daniel about it, he said, "Mum just wanted to start a savings account. Nothing serious." I believed him, because that's what wives are taught to do. Trust. Months passed. Noah grew, started giggling, babbling. Life slipped back into rhythm. Evelyn's visits became shorter but colder. She'd glance at me like I'd failed some invisible test. One evening, while Daniel bathed Noah, I overheard a conversation in the hallway. Evelyn's voice, hushed but sharp. "I've done my part, Daniel. Don't make me regret it." Then his reply, barely audible. "I know, Mum. Please, not now." When I stepped out, they both went silent. Evelyn smiled again, that same polite, venom-sweet smile. "Just family business," she said. I didn't push. I told myself I was imagining things. The night I found the contract, Daniel had fallen asleep on the couch. A half-finished beer on the coffee table, a spreadsheet open on his laptop. I went to close it, and that's when I saw the email. Trust agreement, final copy, sent from Evelyn's lawyer. Curiosity tugged at me. I shouldn't have opened it, but I did. It was detailed, full of clauses and formal language, but the heart of it was simple. Evelyn had created a trust for Noah, but only under the condition that I had no legal say in it. The clause read, "In the event of any marital separation, or in the absence of the mother's full cooperation with the family's financial guardianship plan, the trust shall remain solely under the authority of Evelyn Carter and her son, Daniel Carter." And beneath it, a sentence that made my throat close. "The mother, Sarah Carter, shall have no custodial or financial influence over said trust, present or future." I could barely breathe. My name, my baby, my exclusion, all neatly written in legal ink. I read it again, my heart pounding louder than the ticking clock in the quiet room. When Daniel stirred awake, I was standing there, holding the paper. "Daniel," I whispered, "what is this?" He rubbed his eyes, confused, then saw what I was holding. His face drained of colour. "Sarah, listen." "No," I said. "You listen. You signed this." He looked at me for a long time before he said quietly, "Mum just wanted to make sure Noah was protected. In case anything happened between us." Between us. Something broke inside me then. Not loud, just a quiet, deep fracture. That night I didn't sleep. I sat by Noah's crib watching him breathe. His tiny chest rising and falling, oblivious to the storm outside his door. I thought about the trust, the signatures, the way Evelyn had orchestrated it all behind my back. It wasn't about protection. It was about control. She wanted to make sure that no matter what happened, I'd never truly be Noah's mother in her eyes. And Daniel, he'd let her. The next morning I decided I wouldn't confront Evelyn yet, not until I understood exactly what she'd done and how to undo it. Because this wasn't just about money, it was about dignity, and I wasn't going to let anyone write me out of my own child's future. The next few days I pretended everything was fine. I cooked breakfast like usual, folded laundry, kissed Daniel goodbye when he left for work. But inside I was watching and waiting. It's strange how, once a truth cracks open, you start seeing what was always there. The small things I'd ignored before now screamed for my attention. Evelyn's constant questions about our finances, the way Daniel grew quiet every time she called, the sudden talk of family foundations and legacy planning that had never interested him before. I started paying attention to the details. What time she called, what tone he used, the way his shoulders tensed after hanging up. It wasn't paranoia. It was survival. One afternoon, while Daniel was at work, I decided to visit Evelyn. I told myself it was for coffee, a casual drop-in. But deep down I wanted to see how she'd react, whether her eyes would flicker with guilt when she saw me. Her house was immaculate, as always. Cream walls, polished floors, the faint smell of lavender and something expensive. She opened the door with that practiced grace of hers. "Sarah," she said, her voice soft and surprised. "What a lovely surprise." I smiled politely. "I was just in the area. Thought I'd stop by." She gestured for me to sit. "Tea?" "Yes, please." As she poured, I noticed a thick folder on her dining table, gold letters embossed on the cover. Carter Family Trust. I felt my pulse quicken. "So," I said lightly, "you've been busy with the trust?" Her eyes flicked up, just for a moment, but enough. "Ah, Daniel told you?" I took a sip of tea to steady my voice. "He mentioned something. I didn't realize you'd formalized it already." She smiled thinly. "Well, dear, when it comes to a child's future, we can't leave things to chance." "Of course," I said. "I just wish I'd been part of the discussion." Evelyn's smile didn't waver, but her tone cooled. "It's a legal matter, Sarah. Complicated things you wouldn't want to stress about right now. You've got your hands full with Noah." I felt the sting under her words, a polite way of saying I didn't belong in her world. So I asked the question that had been burning inside me. Why was I excluded from the document? Her teacup paused halfway to her lips. "I read it, Evelyn. The clause that removes my rights if I ever disagree." She set her cup down slowly, eyes sharp now. "Then you've been snooping." "I've been protecting my son," I said quietly. Her lips tightened. "Your son? He's our blood, Sarah. And my job is to make sure he doesn't grow up under unstable influence." I blinked, stunned. "Unstable? What are you implying?" She stood, gathering her calm like a cloak. "You're emotional, dear. You act from the heart, not the head. That's sweet. Dangerous, but sweet. I'm thinking of his long-term welfare. You'd thank me one day if you were sensible enough to see it." My voice trembled, but I held her gaze. "You mean if I'm obedient enough to let you control us?" Her eyes hardened. "I built this family. Don't forget that. Daniel would have nothing without me. And now you think that gives you rights over my child?" Evelyn leaned in slightly, her perfume sharp in the air. "You'll never understand, Sarah. Some of us are born to lead, some to follow. Daniel knows where he belongs. You should too." There it was. The truth. Unveiled, unashamed. I stood, heart pounding. "You may have written my name out of your contract, Evelyn, but you can't erase me from my son's life." Her expression didn't change, but her voice turned icy. "We'll see." That evening I told Daniel about the conversation. He rubbed his temples, sighed. "Sarah, why would you confront her like that? You know how she gets." "Because she's trying to own our child's future, Daniel. She's making sure things are structured properly." I stared at him. "Structured?" "She called me unstable. She said you belonged to her." He looked away, his jaw tight. "She didn't mean it like that." I wanted to shake him, to make him see what I saw. But instead I said quietly, "You signed something that makes me a stranger in my son's life if things go wrong. Does that sound like protection to you?" He didn't answer. That silence, heavier than any argument, told me everything I needed to know. In the days that followed, I began to plan. Not for revenge, not yet, but for understanding. I needed to know exactly how far this trust went. So I visited the lawyer listed on the document, a Mr. Whitmore. A tall, weary man with silver hair and the look of someone who'd seen too many family feuds. He hesitated when I introduced myself. "You're Mrs. Carter?" "Yes," I said. "Daniel Carter's wife. I'd like to discuss the trust created for our son." He adjusted his glasses, uncomfortable. "I'm afraid I can't disclose details without authorization." "Authorization from whom? My husband? My mother-in-law?" He nodded stiffly. I leaned forward, lowering my voice. "Mr. Whitmore, I already have a copy of the document. I just need to know, is this even legal? Can a grandmother exclude a child's mother from a trust like this?" He hesitated, then sighed. "Technically, yes, if the father consents and the funds are provided by the grandmother." "So she used her money to buy control?" He didn't respond, but the silence said enough. Before I left, he looked at me with something like pity. "You seem like a good woman, Mrs. Carter. Just be careful. These things get ugly fast." I thanked him, holding back tears until I reached the car. Because he was right. It was ugly. And it was just beginning. That night, I wrote everything down. Dates, conversations, copies of emails. I created a small folder labeled Noah's Future. It wasn't about money anymore. It was about truth. As I tucked Noah into bed, I whispered, "No one decides your life but me, sweetheart. No one." And for the first time in months, I stopped feeling scared. I started feeling ready. The next morning, I woke to the sound of Daniel in the kitchen, his voice low, hushed. Through the half-open door, I heard him say, "I told you, Mum, she found out. She went to see Whitmore." A pause, then sharper. "No, I didn't tell her where the documents are." I froze. He was talking to Evelyn, again. I moved quietly down the hall, every step measured. From the doorway, I saw him gripping his phone, pacing by the counter, his expression tense. "She's being unreasonable," he said, "but I'll handle it." Then softer, almost pleading, "Please don't threaten that, Mum, it's not fair." He turned suddenly and our eyes met. The colour drained from his face. "Sarah," he whispered, ending the call. I stood there, arms crossed, heart hammering in my chest. "So this is how you handle things, calling her behind my back?" He opened his mouth, but I didn't let him speak. "You lied to me, Daniel." Again. His voice cracked, guilt thick in it. "I didn't lie. I was trying to fix this before it got worse." "Fix what? The fact that your mother legally wrote me out of our child's life?" He ran a hand through his hair, exasperated. "She's not trying to hurt you, Sarah. You're making this bigger than it needs to be." "Bigger than it needs to be?" My voice trembled. "You let her create a document that strips me of rights to my own child, and I'm the problem?" His eyes flashed with frustration. "It's her money, Sarah. She's funding Noah's education, his future. She just wants to make sure it's handled responsibly." "Responsibly," I repeated, laughing bitterly. "Meaning she handles it, and I disappear." He looked away again, jaw tightening, and that silence, that cowardly silence, hurt more than any word. I felt something inside me snap. "You know what hurts the most," I said quietly, "that you didn't even fight for me. You just signed whatever she put in front of you, like a boy doing what his mother told him." He winced, but I kept going. "Do you even hear yourself? You're a father now, Daniel. Our son needs a man who can make his own choices." He didn't answer. So I turned, went upstairs, and began packing a bag. When he followed me, I didn't yell. I didn't even cry. I just said, "I'm taking Noah to my sister's for a few days. I need space." "Sarah, please," he said, voice low, breaking. "Don't do this." "I'm not leaving," I said. "I'm remembering who I am." At my sister Emily's house, the world felt softer. Her home smelled like cinnamon and coffee, and for the first time in months I could breathe without measuring each breath. Emily watched me carefully as I recounted everything: the contract, Evelyn, Daniel's silence. When I finished, she said, "That's not family, Sarah. That's control disguised as love." I stared at my tea, the steam curling like quiet judgment. She's his mother. I keep telling myself she loves Noah. "She loves power," Emily said. "And Daniel. He's been conditioned to obey her." I nodded slowly. "So how do I break that cycle without destroying my marriage?" Emily's gaze softened. "Maybe it's not about saving the marriage right now. Maybe it's about saving yourself." Her words stayed with me that night as I rocked Noah to sleep. 2 days later, I got a message from Daniel. "We need to talk. Please come home. Mum's coming over. We can fix this together." Something in me hesitated, the smallest flicker of hope. Maybe he'd finally realized how wrong this all was. Maybe he wanted to stand beside me this time. I went home that evening, heart heavy but open. When I arrived, Evelyn was already there. She sat on the sofa, legs crossed, a folder beside her. The folder. "Sarah," she said coolly, "we're glad you're back. Let's discuss this like adults." Daniel stood by the fireplace, tense, his eyes darting between us. I stayed standing. "I'm listening." Evelyn opened the folder and pulled out a stack of papers. "We're amending the trust. I've decided to include a provision for you, under certain conditions." "Conditions?" I asked. "Yes," she said. "You'll agree to let Daniel manage Noah's education funds, and you'll refrain from making independent financial decisions that could jeopardize family stability." I let out a small, humorless laugh. "So basically, you'll let me exist as long as I don't act like a mother or an adult." Daniel stepped forward. "Sarah, it's not like that. She's trying—" "No," I snapped. "She's always trying. Trying to rewrite the rules, trying to erase my say in everything that matters." I turned to Evelyn. "You think love is control, you think money gives you ownership, but let me tell you something. My child is not your asset." Her face hardened, lips pressed thin. "Be careful, dear. Pride doesn't pay tuition." I looked her dead in the eye. "Neither does manipulation." Then I picked up the folder, tore the top page cleanly in half and dropped it on the table. Evelyn gasped. "That's a legal document." I met her glare with calm I didn't know I had. "Not anymore." Daniel moved toward me, panic rising. "Sarah, stop. You can't just—" "I can," I said, "because this, all of this, is my family too, and I'm done being silent." Evelyn stood, trembling with anger. "You'll regret this. You have no idea who you're dealing with." I smiled, faint but sure. "No, Evelyn, you have no idea who I've become." That night, Daniel didn't speak to me. He slept on the couch again, but I didn't cry this time. Instead, I began researching family law, trusts, and parental rights. I called a friend from college who worked as a paralegal, and she confirmed what I needed to hear. Evelyn couldn't remove me from Noah's future without my consent. Her trust had legal holes, ones I could use. For the first time in weeks, I felt powerful. The next morning, I drafted my own letter, not a threat, not a plea, just a statement of fact. All financial or custodial decisions regarding Noah Carter must include the consent of both legal parents. Any attempt to override that will be met with formal legal challenge. I sent it to Evelyn, copied Daniel, and filed a record with my lawyer friend. Minutes later, Evelyn called. I didn't answer. For the first time in a long while, the house felt quiet, but not empty. Peaceful. I looked at Noah sleeping, his little hand curled around mine, and I whispered, "We're not just surviving anymore, baby. We're taking back what's ours." It's strange how empowerment doesn't arrive with a roar, but with silence. A calm, grounded kind of quiet that fills the cracks where fear used to live. That morning, after sending the letter, I made myself a cup of tea, chamomile, the same kind I'd stopped drinking because Evelyn said it smelled like dust. Now I sipped it slowly, breathing in the scent, feeling the bitterness coat my tongue. Daniel came downstairs looking pale, tired, maybe even a little lost. He glanced at the laptop on the table, where my sent email still glowed on the screen. "So you really went through with it," he said softly. "Yes," I replied, without looking up. "Someone had to." He sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. "You could have at least told me first." I set my cup down, met his eyes. "You haven't really been listening, Daniel. Not for a long time." He winced, but said nothing. "I tried to trust you," I continued. "I believed you'd protect us, but you signed something that gave your mother control over our lives. And then you called that love." He swallowed hard. "I didn't know how to stop her." "That's the thing," I said quietly. "You don't stop her. You obey her." The words hung between us like smoke, heavy, suffocating. Daniel slumped into the chair opposite me, face in his hands. "You think I wanted this? That I enjoy being caught between the two of you?" "No," I said. "But I think you're too scared to disappoint her, and that fear has cost us everything." He looked up at me then, eyes red-rimmed. "So what now? Are you going to leave me?" I hesitated. "I don't know, but I won't let anyone, not even you, decide what kind of mother I get to be." Over the next week I stayed focused. While Daniel sulked and avoided conversation, I quietly gathered every piece of evidence I could. Copies of the trust agreement, texts between Daniel and Evelyn, the emails she sent to the lawyer. I created a folder labeled Noah's Future, Real Version. My friend Jenna, the paralegal, helped me draft an official notice, one that revoked any authorization I hadn't personally signed. It wasn't about revenge. It was about record, about reclaiming the paper trail Evelyn had tried to erase me from. When I delivered the document to Whitmore Co., the same receptionist from before gave me a small, almost knowing smile. "Good for you," she whispered as I turned to leave. A few days later, the first ripple of consequence arrived. Evelyn called Daniel, furious. I heard every word through the thin walls. "How dare she interfere?" she spat. "This was supposed to protect Noah. Does she even understand what she's jeopardizing?" Daniel's voice was low, shaky. "Mum, please. She's not trying to hurt anyone." "Not trying to hurt anyone. She's dismantling years of planning. Do you realize what the family will think?" There it was, the real motive. Not love, not legacy, reputation. When Daniel came into the living room afterward, he looked utterly defeated. "She's threatening to pull all her funding," he said quietly. I shrugged. "Then she can keep her money. Noah doesn't need a trust built on manipulation." He stared at me as though I'd said something radical. "You can't just say that, Sarah. You don't understand how much she's done enough," I interrupted. "And maybe it's time you stop measuring love in terms of bank accounts." That evening, while Noah napped, I sat at the kitchen table with my journal, something I hadn't touched since before his birth. I wrote, "I am not powerless. I am not replaceable. My child's future isn't a contract, it's love, time, and presence. And no one, not even family, gets to sign those away." As I wrote, I realized something had shifted. This wasn't just about Evelyn anymore. It was about me finally stepping out of the shadow of what everyone expected me to be. The grateful daughter-in-law, the quiet wife, the nice mother. No, I was done being nice. I was going to be honest. The confrontation came 2 weeks later at Evelyn's house. She had summoned Daniel and me for a final discussion. Her tone in the message was formal, clipped. When we arrived, the air inside her living room felt heavy, perfumed with expensive roses and disapproval. Evelyn sat by the window, papers stacked neatly beside her. Her silver jewelry caught the afternoon light like armor. "Sarah," she began, "I hope you understand what you've done." "I do," I said. "I've protected my son." Her smile was sharp. "Protected him from me?" "Yes," I replied. "From your need to control everything you touch." She laughed softly, not kindly. "You always did have a flair for the dramatic." Daniel shifted uncomfortably beside me. "Mum, maybe we should—" "No," I said, cutting him off. "She should hear this." I turned to Evelyn fully. "You wanted me gone because I didn't fit your image. Because I wasn't polished enough, obedient enough, or quiet enough to make you feel in control. But here's the thing, Evelyn. Motherhood doesn't come with a contract. It comes with heart. And I've got plenty of that." Her jaw tightened. "You'll regret speaking to me like this." "I already regret letting you treat me like less than human," I said. "That ends today." For a long, tense moment, none of us spoke. Then softly, Daniel said, "Mum, she's right." Evelyn's head snapped toward him. "Excuse me." He took a shaky breath. "You went too far. I should have stopped this earlier." The silence that followed was deafening. Evelyn's eyes filled, not with sorrow, but disbelief. "You'd take her side over mine." "I'm not taking sides," he said. "I'm choosing peace." And just like that, something in her seemed to falter. Her lips trembled, but she said nothing. I stood then, gently lifting my bag. "I think we're done here." In the car, Daniel gripped the steering wheel tightly. "Do you think she'll ever forgive me?" he asked quietly. I looked out the window, watching the world blur by. Maybe. But forgiveness isn't something we can demand. We earn it, one honest act at a time. He nodded slowly, tears glistening in his eyes. "I want to do better, Sarah. For you, for Noah." And for the first time in months, I believed him. That night, I put Noah to bed and lingered by his crib, brushing a curl from his forehead. "You're safe now," I whispered. Mama made sure of it. The house was quiet again, not tense, not fragile, just still. A kind of peace that comes after a storm finally passes. Peace, I soon learned, has an echo. You think the storm is over. Then the ripples begin to move outward, touching people you hadn't even considered. The following week, word of our confrontation spread through the family like wildfire. Daniel's aunt, always the keeper of family gossip, called me first. "Sarah," she said in a hushed tone, "I heard about what happened with Evelyn. Is it true you found some legal papers about Noah?" I hesitated. "Yes, but I'd rather not discuss the details." She sighed. "I always knew Evelyn's pride would cost her someday. You did what you had to do." Her words surprised me. For the first time, I realized people had seen what I'd been living through. They just hadn't intervened. Maybe they were too afraid of Evelyn's wrath. A few days later, I got a message from Evelyn. Just one line. "I hope you're proud of the mess you've made." I stared at it for a long time. Then I put my phone down. For once, I didn't respond. It wasn't silence from fear. It was silence from power. I didn't owe her a defense anymore. Daniel started therapy on his own. He said he wanted to unlearn the way he was raised, and for the first time, I saw effort instead of excuses. Sometimes, after Noah went to sleep, we'd sit on the porch watching the streetlights flicker. There was a gentleness in those moments, fragile but real. "I keep thinking about that day," Daniel said one evening. "The way Mum looked at me. I don't think she ever expected me to choose you." I exhaled slowly. "Maybe that's because until now, you never really did." He nodded, eyes glistening. "I know. I'm sorry." It wasn't perfect, but apologies, I'd learned, don't need to fix everything. They just need to begin something. Evelyn's social circle began to distance themselves. The women who once adored her afternoon teas and charity luncheons started declining invitations. I heard through whispers that she'd stepped back from several committees. Her version of events, I'm sure, painted her as the victim, a misunderstood matriarch, undone by a spiteful daughter-in-law. But stories have a way of bending toward truth, no matter how much someone tries to twist them. Then one morning I received an email from Whitmore Co. "Dear Mrs. Carter, we wanted to inform you that Mrs. Evelyn Carter has requested to dissolve the prior trust arrangement. Please find attached the official release of contract. Yours sincerely, Whitmore Co." I opened the attachment. There it was, her signature, neat and deliberate. A line of ink that closed a chapter she'd once tried to write without me. When Daniel came home that evening, I handed him the paper. He read it silently, then looked up at me. "She did it?" "Yes," I said softly. He smiled faintly. "Maybe she's finally realized what she lost." "Or maybe," I said, "she's realized what she can't control." A week later, we received an invitation. Noah's first birthday party, hosted at Evelyn's house. Daniel looked at me uncertainly. "Do you want to go?" I thought about it for a long moment. Part of me wanted to decline, to hold my ground by staying away. But another part, the quieter, wiser part, whispered something else. Healing isn't always about walking away. Sometimes it's about walking through the discomfort, to prove to yourself that it no longer owns you. So we went. Evelyn's house was as immaculate as ever, the smell of polished wood and fresh flowers filling the air. But there was something different, softer, almost fragile. When she saw me holding Noah, she froze for a second. Then she smiled, a small, hesitant thing. "Thank you for coming," she said. Her voice was thinner than I remembered. I nodded. "Thank you for inviting us." For a while we made small talk. She cooed at Noah, called him my handsome boy, and offered us tea. It was polite, restrained, and strange, like two diplomats pretending to be family. But near the end of the afternoon, when everyone else had drifted toward the garden, she asked me quietly, "May I speak to you for a moment?" I hesitated, then followed her to the sitting room. She took a deep breath. "I wanted to apologize for the contract, for the things I said." I studied her face, the fine lines, the weary eyes. She looked older than she had a month ago. "I thought I was protecting my son," she said softly. "But I see now I was just protecting my control." The words caught me off guard. I don't expect you to forgive me, she continued, but I hope you'll let Noah know that his grandmother tried to do better. For a moment I said nothing. Then I nodded slowly. He'll know. Her eyes filled and she reached out, not for a hug, but just a gentle touch on my arm. It was tentative, fragile, and human. And somehow, that was enough. On the drive home, the sky burned orange and pink. Noah babbled softly in the back seat, clutching his stuffed elephant. Daniel reached for my hand. You were incredible today. I smiled faintly. I just told the truth. He shook his head. No, you lived it. For the first time in what felt like forever, I believed we could start again, not as puppets of someone else's plans, but as a family of our own making. Later that night, after Noah was asleep, I found myself back at the kitchen table, the same spot where I'd once confronted Daniel about the contract. I lit a candle, watched the flame dance. Then I opened my journal and wrote, "Some battles aren't fought for power, they're fought for peace. I didn't win by tearing her down. I won by standing tall. And maybe, just maybe, that's how real inheritance works. Not in money, but in courage." I closed the book, blew out the candle and smiled. The silence that followed wasn't empty this time. It was full. Of peace, of lessons, of everything I'd almost lost. Time moved differently after that. It wasn't marked by arguments or tension anymore, but by the small, unremarkable rhythms of daily life. Noah's laughter in the mornings, Daniel's quiet apologies turning into steady actions, my own reflection in the mirror beginning to look like someone I recognized again. For months, I'd been living as if everything around me could collapse at any moment, but now there was solidity again, not perfection, but presence. Daniel started cooking breakfast on Sundays, the way my father used to. He said it was his way of resetting the week. Sometimes we'd eat pancakes that were too brown or eggs that were slightly runny, but they were ours. Evelyn visited once every few weeks. The visits were short and careful. She brought small gifts for Noah. Books, a wooden toy car, a sweater she'd knitted herself. There was an awkwardness between us, but also a kind of mutual understanding. We both knew that forgiveness didn't erase the past. It just made space for the future. One afternoon she arrived with a framed photo of Daniel as a baby. "He had that same look," she said, watching Noah crawl across the carpet. "Always curious, always reaching for things he wasn't supposed to." For the first time I smiled at her without effort. "Maybe that's a good thing," I said. "Curiosity is how we grow." Evelyn nodded slowly, eyes softening. "Yes, maybe it is." It wasn't reconciliation, not fully, but it was something real. As the seasons changed, I began to write again, not just in my journal, but stories, essays, little reflections about motherhood, control, and identity. I sent one to a local magazine under a pseudonym. They published it a month later. The title was simple: The Contract I Never Signed. It wasn't about the legal document. It was about the unspoken expectations women inherit from mothers, from partners, from the invisible rules that dictate who we're supposed to be. The piece ended with a line that had come to me one night while feeding Noah. "The only contract that matters is the one you make with yourself. To live honestly, love fiercely, and never surrender your name for peace." When I read that line aloud to Daniel, he looked at me for a long time before saying, "That's the strongest thing you've ever written." I smiled quietly. "It's the truest." One evening, months later, I went for a walk alone. The sun had set, but the air was still warm. The streetlights hummed faintly, And somewhere in the distance, a baby cried, that same soft, universal sound that belongs to every mother, every home. I thought about everything that had happened. The contract, the betrayal, the confrontation, the strange peace that followed. And for the first time I didn't feel anger, just gratitude, for the strength I hadn't known I had, for the truth that had finally found its voice. There was a time when I would have done anything to keep the peace. Now I understood something deeper. Peace without self-respect is just silence, and silence isn't love. When I returned home, Daniel was sitting in the nursery, reading to Noah. The lamp cast a warm pool of light across their faces. Noah giggled as Daniel pointed to a picture of the moon. "Say goodnight to Mama," Daniel whispered. Noah turned his head, eyes wide and sleepy, and reached toward me. I lifted him into my arms, breathing in the familiar scent of baby powder and milk. "Good night, my love," I murmured. "You're free. You always will be." As I stood there, rocking him gently, I realized something simple and true. I had rewritten the contract, not with ink and signatures, but with choice. The quiet, daily kind of choice that defines who we become. And that, I thought, was the real inheritance I wanted to leave behind. Sometimes, the people who say they're protecting us are really just protecting their power. Sometimes love disguises itself as control. And sometimes the only way to save what's pure is to walk through the fire, unflinching, until the truth stands bare. If you were in my place, would you have fought back? Would you have risked peace to reclaim your power? Tell me in the comments. And if my story reminded you of someone you once had to stand up to, share it, because every story like this deserves to be heard.